Hello buddy, it's Wyvern here with another Total War Warhammer 2 community cast. And this time around we are on the City of Bones watching a matchup between the High Elves and the forces of the Tomb Kings. This replay was submitted to me by Luca, who is taking control of the High Elf forces, and he is squaring off against another very competitive player controlling the Tomb Kings, Ryson. So this is definitely going to be an interesting match, and we already see some rather unusual, in my opinion, choices for some of the units here. Perhaps not unusual, but something you don't see all that often. Now, the Lord, definitely not much unusual here for the High Elves. Techless, very competitive Lord choice, basically good in any matchup. He's got great Arcane Conduit, great ones of Magic Generation, especially combined with Wild Heart. He does have the Shield of Safri, which is going to make his troops so much tankier. He does have Kindle Flame, which is going to have some nasty synergy with the fire damage on the Handmaidens, as well as Sister of Avalorn, potentially making them much more devastating, especially if you manage to snare a target with Net of Mintok. Even more so if it is a Tomb King Lord, because most Tomb King Lords do have a fire weakness. We also do have the Net of Mintok for the snare, Enfeebling Foe to help, for example, the Silver Helms punch above their weight against a target. Silver Helms normally not really something you would be throwing up against, say, a War Sphinx. Even though it is specifically against infantry, it still has very solid melee stats and will crump a unit like Silverhelms, but with a little help from Enfeebling Foe, they can hold out a little bit better. Otherwise, it can help the Handmaidens punch above their weight against, for example, the Tomb Prince or against Ushabti units like that. We also do have the Flock of Doom, so hopefully melting some Tomb King mobs, and Potion of Koroi, of course, to keep Techless in tip-top shape. Besides that, there are two Handmaidens, and this is a unit you do not see all that often. But that does not mean they are not competitive. They do have a decent ranged attack with AP as well as fire and magic damage. So the fires are going to be very potent against the Tomb King heroes and lords with their fire vulnerability. It's also going to synergize really nicely with Kindle Flame against any target that they choose. And they of course do have decent melee stats. They don't have the AP of High Elf Princes, which is one of the reasons I think you don't see them as often. And they don't have the armor or necessarily the sustainability. However, they still do have anti-large of 35. They still have pretty high weapon strength. And against a more lightly armored foe like the Tomb Prince, they'll hit like trucks. Even against a lord like Cetra. Sure, 95 armor is good, but they still have 110 AP damage. Plus that bonus is large, and they're still going to get about a quarter of their damage through on Cetra with every swing of the non-AP damage. So they're definitely going to be hitting pretty efficiently, especially if an Enfeebling Foe is dropped to boot. Now, besides those fine ladies, we do have two Sisters of Avalorn. These are a very solid choice in this matchup, simply because they let you focus down big monsters quickly. If you hit someone with a Net of Mintok, stack that on Kindle Flame going off, Sisters of Avalorn will just mulch them in seconds. They have massive DPS, 25 for every 10 seconds, 18 AP per shot is just insane. These ladies will do a lot of hurt very, very quickly. Now, one of their big weaknesses, though, is Ushabti Great Bows, and most likely to counter them, Luca has chosen to bring 3 Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers, and these guys are all chevroned up to Veterancy rank 9, so we're going to see if that Veterancy pays off. Should make them deadly accurate, should make them fire very quickly. I believe it's under 9-second reload time, so it's pretty insane how fast they'll be firing, and these guys are a hard counter to Ushabti Great Bows against Bow Giants and all those sorts of units. They are very, very powerful against those troops. Besides that, we do have a front line of spears, as well as some spears here in the back, protecting the single unit bolt throwers. Not much to be said for these guys that have cannon fodder. They'll hold the line as long as needed, especially against cheaper trash units like Skeleton Warriors, though obviously not as well against Tomb Guard. Sisters of Avalorn, of course, can protect themselves reasonably well. They can slug it out with Tomb Guard. In fact, they can they'll crush units like Skeleton Horsemen or Carrion or Skeleton Warriors, whatever they may be, relatively efficiently on their own. So with the spears to zone away the more dangerous targets, they should do rather well. Finally, we do have two Silver Helms defending the backline as well. In my opinion, a very good choice. Though personally, I prefer Lady Nevers just because they're a little cheaper. But these guys do have the benefit of being a little better in a sustained combat. They can stall something like Cetra a lot better. But at the same time, they will mulch a unit like Skeleton Horsemen or a unit like Carrion if it tries to disrupt the backline. And I think that's one of the things people often underestimate about low-tier backline harass. A unit like Carrion has very high melee defense, so and it only counts as infantry. So against a unit like High Elf Spears, it will take forever to kill them and chase them off. A unit like Silverhelms will sweep them aside in seconds, and that is why this unit is so very potent in this matchup, and most likely one of the big reasons why Luca chose to run them. Now, immediately we can see the Bolt Throwers teeing off on poor Cetra, who is leading the Tomb King force. Cetra has come rather well kitted out. We can see that he's come in with the Blade of Tra, which is going to be giving him massive debuffs when he hits a target and has this ability active. Imbues the blind effect. Lasts 40 seconds, so 43 seconds, so definitely pretty potent. He's also got Wrath of Tra, which is going to help him get out of sticky situations. Nero's Incantation of Protection. of little help against the Sisters of Avalorn and the and the Handmaidens of the Everqueen, but still, you know, it can help protect him a little bit, especially against their melee attacks or the bolt throwers. It could be a big boon. He also does have Job's Incantation of Cursed Blades, going to be buffing lower end troops, make them fight a little better, or maybe buffing himself to fight a little better. And Usirion's Incantation of Vengeance, so perhaps looking to counteract enemy cavalry play or enemy backline harass that he was anticipating. Ryson did decide to run with that spell there. We also have a Tomb Prince coming in cheap, budget version, on a horse with Just Guardian, protecting etc., making him a bit tankier. We can see those bolt throwers kind of failing, so those chevrons perhaps not paying off here. They are kind of flunking, trying to snipe, etc. Besides that, we do have two significant flank forces, Skeleton Horsemen as well as Carrion on either end, looking to pincer the High Elf line immediately and get in on those juicy backlines, because those backlines are so very dangerous to the Tomb Kings. The front line for the Skeletons is for the Tomb Kings is a mix of Skelly Warriors, Tomb Guard, and more Skeleton Warriors, with more Skeleton Spears and King Nakesh's Scorpion Legion in the backline. So it's going to be a bit of a wet noodle contest in the front line, but those Tomb Guard and the single unit Ushabti could be enough to swing it in favor of the Tomb Kings. We also do have 2 units of Ushabti Greatbows who are immediately murderizing these poor sisters and knocking them down to 50 models. That is one of the really devastating things about Ushabti Greatbows. If they are well microed, they can do so much work, and you can see here that Luca is not allowing this sort of barrage to go unpunished. Immediately the bolt throwers shifting fire and starting to pound on these Ushabti Greatbows, and this is critical. These guys are the biggest threat right now that really needs to be shut down, and the bolt throwers are a hard counter to these units, and you can see they're immediately chipping them down. Perhaps a Narrow's Incantation of Protection could help right now, but it's not happening. They're losing models quickly. Meantime, over here, the Chariots that we're trying to get on the backline do get snared by Net of Mintok, and in come the Handmaidens of the Everqueen, slamming into these guys. Narrow's Incantation of Protection does go down, trying to keep them in shape, but it's not enough as these Sister of Avalorn start unloading on them. However, the Sisters are in for a very, very bad day, as in come the Carrion, in comes the Prince, and in comes Citra, collapsing on them very, very quickly. Handmaidens are way out of position to protect them, and while the Skeleton Chariots are getting massacred, this is a cheap and kind of crappy unit. It's not the biggest loss for the Tomb King player. If he can wipe out the Sister of Avalorn in exchange, it's going to be a huge win. So you can see here Luca pulling clear, while Ryson is very effectively sort of beating up on these Sisters of Avalorn, taking advantage of Citra's high mass and charge bonus to really butcher them. In the meantime, the front line has buckled, and this is definitely looking a little disastrous for the poor elves. Sisters of Avalorn completely routed, Ushabti piling through with the Skeleton Horsemen. Now, as we can see here, those Silverhelms decimating the Carrion, so proving their mettle, and the bolt throwers continue firing, annihilating those Ushabti Greatbows. So it's certainly not a one-sided massacre. In the meantime, over here, the Silverhelms, having pursued off the Skeleton Horsemen, are going to now be able to pivot back and perhaps engage on the central fight. The Sister of Avalorn is still in there, still on 40-some models, able to stick around. And you can see the Handmaidens with Enfeebling Foe, slugging it out with Citra and doing some major work. He is not having a good time, and that was what we discussed earlier, just how much of a difference that can make. Now, he does cast Narrow's Incantation of Protection, which is going to make him so much tankier and beefier, plus proc the passive, allowing him to heal. But, you know, it's something. It is a big win. Meantime, the bolt throwers continue to fire, but now they've shifted over to Citra. I'm not sure if that's a good decision. With Narrow's Incantation of Protection, he's incredibly tanky. Keep in mind, he does have a 15% missile resist built in as a Lord, so that's kind of a huge advantage for him. And right now, these bolt throwers are doing almost nothing, and they could really be decimating these Ushabti, who are just farming kills on the important units for the High Elves, most notably the Silverhelms, but also they've been shooting up the Sisters of Avalorn, who are kind of a few of them are rallying here, but they're definitely not in good shape. Now, Skelly Warriors here breaching the back line. Luca does pull his bolt throwers off the guns, which is very important here. That's one thing that I personally often don't do, and it's something that good players will do. If you're paying attention and you see your opponents about to overrun your artillery, decrew and run like hell. Do not stick around and get butchered. Over here, those Skeleton Horsemen, very well played by Ryson, getting into the back line here, launching a brutal charge against the poor Sisters, and they're going to be routed from the field. I can't see them sticking around much longer. But the Silverhelm still pursuing, and do keep in mind, Skeleton Horsemen are a very, and I mean a very trash unit in the sustained melee, and they're very slow. They only have 76 speed to the Silverhelm's 78, so this is going to be an absolute massacre of the skeletons, and we can see those proud elven lancers just crushing skeletons underfoot. And this is not going to be a long fight. Over here, these Silverhelms, between the sustained fire as well as the Ushabti melee, are being routed off, so big loss there. The Sister of Avalorn here actually being interdicted by skeletons, and they're not engaging. Not entirely sure why. And over here, the poor bolt thrower crew is actually being overwhelmed. Teclis trying to get in there and help, I think. Oh no, he's actually shifting target. So this is definitely a huge win, actually, for Luca. He's managed to snare Citra. Citra is now down to 2,000 HP, and Luca still has both Handmaidens in good shape with good amounts of ammo. Now, he doesn't have the regrowth, so if these guys, all the damage they take is permanent. Teclis won't be bringing them back from the brink. But they're whittling them down. Like we mentioned before, they're still able to hit pretty hard. And, yeah, Citra's definitely not having a great day. He once again casts Nair's Incantation of Protection, which heals him a little bit, but he's bleeding HP pretty hard and starting to hemorrhage and die. He's going to start crumbling soon at this rate. And that's definitely not where Ryzen wants to be. And, of course, he does try to focus Teclis here, but I don't think that's the smartest move because Teclis does have the Potion of Koroi. You can always pop that and escape. And now Citra is trying to flee, but the Handmaidens are on him. They can fire on the move, and they are going to be shutting this bad boy down. Over here, in the meantime, the Silver Helm's getting pounded by the Ushabti Greatbows, so I think that was a huge mistake. This is not shutting down those Ushabti much earlier. They're now at 39 kills. I'm 90% sure all of these kills have basically been against Silver Helms or Sister of Avalor. They've actually almost gained a Chevron, so it's been huge. But down goes Citra, and that is a disaster for the Tomb Kings, losing their leadership, very brutal. And yet, Balance of Power dead center, probably because there's just so much of this cheap chaff still around, so much of this infantry. And Luca's troops are kind of on their last legs. These spearmen are getting overwhelmed. These guys are getting overrun. A lot of the crews are actually off their guns right now, which is a big problem. Now, the Handmaidens over here are fleeing the Tomb Prince. He does have a bronze shield, but as long as they keep running, they do have 90 speed, they can kite him, and they can shoot him. And, yeah, so you can definitely pick this bad boy down and whittle him down over time. And if Luca is able to pull that off, this Tomb Prince is not going to be a good spot. And he actually overextends here and gets trapped alone. So this is going to be a bit of a dirty fight, as the Tomb Prince is surrounded from all sides, getting jabbed by those long spears that the Handmaidens wield, and he is having a terrible time of it, trying to escape there. So definitely, I think, a little bit of a slip up there on Ryzen's part, and the Tomb Prince actually falls. So huge misplay there. Meantime, the Eagle Bolt Thrower is trying to flee, Benny Hilling away from these Ushabti, but right now I do think Luca should be able to interdict with the Handmaidens and Teclis. Now, taking an overarching look at the battlefield, we can see the Balance of Power swing decisively into High Elf's favor, but it's certainly not done yet. Both of the Handmaidens are now somewhat bloodied. We still have honestly, most of the infantry or most of the shooting for the High Elves is gone now. Even their cavalry is largely massacred. These Silver Helms are basically gone. They're down to 9 models. Other units completely wiped. These sisters probably are going to wipe or rout if there's a stiff breeze. And these guys, the poor Bolt Thrower crew, overrun. So right now, it's essentially the hero squad fighting against the Ushabti Greatbows and a horde of infantry and spears. So right now, I think if Ryzen manages to consolidate, get rid of some of these last remaining shooting troops, consolidate his forces in a sort of bastion, it's going to be very tough for Luca to crack that, as long as these Bolt Throwers are dealt with. Unfortunately, one Bolt Thrower here is a remanning, and that could spell disaster for the Ushabti, because in a straight-up fight, I'm 99% sure a Bolt Thrower does beat Ushabti Greatbows. In the meantime, these Ushabti over here are crumbling. The Handmaiden is doing a great job, though. These guys down to 1,300 HP. She's definitely suffering, definitely struggling a little bit there. The Ushabti over there crumbling, so they're probably not going to stick around for long. They're probably on a timer now. Honestly, Luca doesn't even have to engage right now. He could probably just run away and let him die. Bolt Thrower, in the meantime, chipping away at these Greatbows, taking advantage of its high veterancy to hit consistently and do some good work there. And see it hitting pretty hard. And in comes the Ushabti summon on the back line here. And yeah, probably going to be devastating. I think it would have been much better used right here, though. And I think, once again, that's a little bit of a slip-up. That Bolt Thrower needs to go. Because potentially, even if once Luca's rid of these Ushabti Greatbows, he can then load Grape Shot on these guys, or the Scatter Shot, push up and shotgun the Skeleton Spears as they're forced to try to fight the Hero Squad. So I think you could see that being a bit of a disaster. Now, Bolt Thrower crew here is rallying. The infantry is basically routed. All these spears fleeing. This Bolt Thrower crew is probably going to rout by proximity, I would think. Some spears are rallying, and these guys are coming back, so hopefully this Bolt Thrower can stick around. We can see a Flock of Doom goes down. Probably a good choice, given that there's no real point in a net right now, and honestly, enfeebling foe against cheap skeleton. Actually, it's a Tomb Guard, so it could have been worth it, maybe. But I can understand why he chose not to use enfeebling foe there. Now, these Ushabti are almost gone. You can see the Bolt Throwers firing away, and they're now out of the Ushabti firing, Greatbows firing away, and they're now out of ammo. Actually, these are the summoned ones. There we go. I was getting confused there. I'm looking at them. I'm like, what? These aren't Ushabti Greatbows. But the summoned Ushabti Greatbows are now closing the gap. The Greatbows are still firing. They're down to 1 round now, and they're going to be out soon. Fortunately, this bolt thrower coming back online despite being bludgeoned and destroyed and down to literally 3 crew members. But they are still going to fight for the High Elf race and make the Asur proud. Now, keep in mind, these Ushabti here are now disintegrating. They are not going to last too much longer. They actually collapsed there, just instantly wiped. And now Luca's in a very strong spot. He does have the match is 75% in his favor. Now that we do have some... maybe about 66%, but still very much in his favor. We do have these Tomb Guard and the Skeleton Warriors and the King Kesha Scorpion Legion very much still in the fight. And keep in mind, with only 40 armor, the Handmaidens and relatively low mass, they actually have, I believe, one of the worst, if not the worst mass for any horse-mounted character in the game. They are going to be pretty heavily threatened by the Nikesha Scorpion Legion, so that could be a big disaster for Luca if he's not able to scrape away. Keep in mind, he has no regrowth, so he's not making comeback with his HP, so he needs to get out of there. The Handmaiden does flee. This other Handmaiden does get it on Ushabti Great Bows, but, you know, they're not pushovers. We can see Flock of Doom going down, trying to melt these guys. Not quite delivering. And it's definitely still a very up-in-the-air fight. These Handmaidens, they cannot carry against cheap trash. They're not designed for that. They're really much more elite snipers. So now Luca is most likely going to sort of kite back, take his time, and try to pick away at these elites. And use that ranged fire to really hopefully win him the game. However, as you can see, Ryson is not simply sitting there and taking it. He is packing up his army, using those Ushabti as a line breaker to just shatter these spears and chase them off the field, and looking to crush the last lines of High Elf resistance. The Bolt Thrower crew here running for dear life, but every time poor Ryson gets on top of some of these guys, in comes new Bolt Thrower men, and they are getting in on the guns in the back. Now, these poor Bolt Throwers are going to get overrun. So that is a bit of a disaster, because this is the healthiest crew. And they're getting wiped by the Ushabti Great Bows. But really, there's not much that can be done at this point to protect them. Now, we can see the Handmaidens continue to chip away. The Ushabti getting whittled down. They actually hit a Chevron and are well on their way to second now. Bolt Thrower crew routes from proximity. Did get a single shotgun blast there, I believe, but definitely not looking too great. You can see the Handmaidens continue chipping away. Balance of power, definitely in the favor of the High Elves, but not by much. And once the ammo is expended on these Handmaidens, I'm not sure it will stay favorable. But the Bolt Thrower there does keep firing. You can see another shot there. Not entirely sure who it was aimed at, but does some damage. Keep in mind, I do believe Handmaidens, though they don't have terrible piercing values, they actually don't have homing missiles, like, say, a Way Stalker. And they also don't do that much damage, so I'm pretty sure that actually reduces how much they can pierce. But you can see the shotgun shells there doing some damage to the Skeleton Spears. And really, I think at this point, this is definitely the best move. Trying to whittle down that infantry, because you can outfight the Ushabti with the Handmaidens, but outfighting this horde of spears is going to be very difficult. Now, I do think it would be a good idea right now to push forward those Bolt Throwers, try to get better shots. But, you know, they're doing work. They're definitely whittling these bad boys down. They're definitely starting to suffer. Another shot from the Handmaidens chips away some more at the Ushabti, and it's going to be a little bit of Benny Hill action here as the High Elves take their time, rightfully so, using up all of their ammunition. Now, the Tomb Kings are not taking it sitting down, as we've discussed before. They are actually pushing forward, but you can see with the artillery fire as well as the Flock of Doom, these guys are actually starting to crumble. And while crumbling, I often bash on it for being a kind of lackluster and not too impactful mechanic, is still a debuff. It is still loss of HP, and it's starting to add up. Now, the Bolt Thrower here down to one shot, so last shot is going to come out here. And Balance of Power very much in the High Elves' favor. You can see the surround is coming out from these Skeletons. Tekla is still in good shape, diving in here. The Handmaiden's getting overwhelmed, but Balance of Power shifts decisively in the High Elves' favor. And a full crumble begins. And I actually think that was probably because of Tekla still being in good shape. I think had the army not shattered there, it might have still been a tough fight for the High Elves. But excellently played to both players. Really, some interesting build choices. I think Ryson's build was actually a pretty safe and relatively standard Tomb King composition for this matchup. You will often see the Ushabti plays because they are so very strong against the Sisters of Avalorn. They're very strong against Dragon Princes. They're good against single entities like dragons or heroes. They're really not bad against much of anything except Bolt Throwers. Bolt Throwers hard counter them. And as we saw, that one unit of Ushabti got annihilated by Triari or Lucas in this Bolt Throwers, and the other unit that got ignored, well, they racked up a lot of damage. 2 chevrons gained, 72 kills, most of those against high-value targets like Sisters and Silverhelms, just doing work. Now, I will say I'm not entirely sure the extra chevrons are worthwhile on the E-Claw bolt throwers. In this match, they might have helped a little bit, but it's hard to gauge. Bolt throwers are already very strong against Bone Giants, as well as Ushabti Great Bows. I'm not sure you really need the buff. And, yeah, you get more rate of fire, but the accuracy really, in my opinion, is not that impactful, though, or at least it didn't seem that impactful in this match, where they were still whiffing a lot of shots, for example, on Cetra, when he was moving around. Obviously, Veterancy doesn't improve projectile velocity, so it isn't always the best. The Handmaidens performed excellently, only 20 and 34 kills, but they sniped Cetra in close quarters. They helped melt the poor Tomb Prince. They just did some major work there, and almost carried the game in some ways. Spears, well, they held well. Poor Sisters of Avalon just got dumpstered. They did get a few volleys off early, but not much. I do think that, honestly, maybe that would have been another benefit. If you strip down the chevrons, you can get like another unit of Valyrian Reavers, probably, or like maybe one more unit of Spears, and protect these sisters a little bit better. Really, my only major critique would have been the lack of focus on the Ushabti Great Bows. I think the Ushabti Great Bows were probably a bigger threat than Cetra, but in hindsight, I guess Cetra's dying did help crumble the Tomb Kings, but I think if those Ushabti Great Bows had gone down before they wiped out, especially the Silver Helms, the match might have swung more favorably for Luca sooner. Now for Ryson's build, like I said, I think it's a pretty safe build. I think it's a solid build. Really, my main critique, I think, was the fact that he sort of let Cetra get caught out alone, and he didn't really... Probably would have been better off falling back to his own lines. He had successfully disrupted the Sister of Avalorn. He had successfully disrupted multiple bolt throwers. So Cetra was not going to go down quickly. He was not going to die easily, but allowing him to sort of get stuck in a protracted engagement. I know Luca dropped some very good Nets of Mintox, some very good enfeebling foes at critical points, but had Ryson played a little more cautiously with Cetra, I think he could have probably kept him alive in better shape for longer. And that could have been a massively impactful thing in the long run, because it would have meant a lot of these troops wouldn't have crumbled as soon. It would have meant potentially more heals from the spellcasts, and would have meant terror in the late game. Terror, especially when there were so many mauled units. Handmaidens don't have immunity psychology needed, just techless. That could have actually been a game changer. So definitely, I think a little too got a little too aggressive. Obviously, Cetra being a very expensive lord, who's very fighty. It's difficult to just sit back and do nothing with him or play cautious with him, and I understand that, because you don't want to be wasting 3,000 of your gold sitting and camping. But I think Cetra could have been a little sort of fallen back, tried to crush some of the skeleton spears, that sort of thing, before the Handmaidens took too much of a chunk out of him. Because once they did, it was too late. He wasn't going to escape on low HP. Luca just wasn't going to let him do that, and he was going to get sniped down. And then the overextension with the Tomb Prince. I think the Tomb Prince, once again, going into late game, could have provided so much anti-large support. Could have actually been a huge boon if he was fighting on top of his spears to deal with the Handmaidens and Teclis. But he died a premature death, isolated and far from home. So, tough situation there. Regardless, very well played to both players here. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoy these community casts, if you would like me to cast your games, be sure to send them to me. I will be leaving a link to an email that you can send them to down below, wyverngamingreplays@gmail.com. If you have any cool games, any cool builds, any cool units, whatever that you want to show off, be sure to send them in, and I'd absolutely love to look at them and cast some of them. So I thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.